I was born in Glenwood, Iowa, and Mom was a single woman in 1931, July 6, 1931. I just turned 80 the other day, and she threw me in the Davenport, Iowa orphanage at birth. She wanted a girl. I don't know. And anyway, I spent 5 years, a couple of months there, and then a foster mother. The second woman admitted to practice law in the state of Iowa took me out, and I was her fifth little orphan waif that she had. She ended up raising 10 over 2 generations, 10 of us kids. Well, when I enlisted in the Navy at 17 and got there, I was 18 when I started boot camp. They tried to tell me how smart I was. And I said, I'm a C student from Iowa. You want smart, you're in trouble. And they said, well, you're in the top 7% of the military. Oh God, I don't hear this stuff. But anyway, then they told me that I could go to the Naval Academy flight training or ROTC. So I was on a destroyer out here 10 months later in the Pacific, and the orders come through ordering me to Florida. I was still 18, so I went down there at 18, finished their course in 16 months, like I said, and I was only 20, barely 20, when I completed all their work. And they were trying to make me a second lieutenant. Well, I had 2 Marine instructors that said, Miller, you go Marine Corps or else. And I said, oh, okay. So if you didn't go Marine Corps, you had to go ensign in the Navy. But 2, my instructors said, we want you in the Marine Corps. I said, okay. But growing up like I did, 5 years of orphanage and all that stuff, never learned to whine, cry, or complain or anything. And I just, maybe I was smart, I don't know.
Do you remember arriving in Vietnam? Arriving.
Arriving? Yeah.
What was it like?
Nothing. In fact, when I was a major, they told me I'm going to Vietnam and be there for 4 or 5 months, and then I was coming back to Hawaii to be the G2 of Fleet Marine Force Pacific, the senior intelligence officer. And I told them, that's a bird colonel's job. And they said, Miller, you're the most qualified man in the Marine Corps. And I was like, oh God, I don't want to hear this stuff. And anyway, they said, bring your family to Hawaii. So I had to move my family to Hawaii. I get over there, and I'm taking over the squadron in Japan. What they had was 4 AD squadrons and 4 F4 B squadrons. And one of each was always in Japan and ferrying battle damaged airplanes back and forth. You know, bring them in, get them repaired, take them back to Vietnam. So I flew. First thing I did I got there, and everybody from Okinawa on kept saying, what were we supposed to do with you, Miller? And I'd say, I don't know. They said I was going to Vietnam and take over a squadron. And by that time, I'd been promoted, or actually orders came through from Commandant of Marine Corps. Promote Miller to Lieutenant Colonel on July 1st, 1967, and give him command of VMA 323 ASAP.
Did you fight in any major battles in the Vietnam War?
Well, I was the aviator, so I was flying closer support with the 3rd Marine Division up on the front lines and bordering on Laos. But as far as any of them being outstanding or anything, no, I can't say that. Just that it was, typical of Vietnam War. We used to laugh because sometimes we'd say, what was your target today? And they'd say, dirt in the open, trees in the open. It wasn't one of our most glamorous wars, to say the least. The day I was shot down, I was going up on a close air support mission with the 3rd Division, and one of the airborne controllers had North Vietnamese troops in the open, a large number of them, and Amtraks and all kinds of vehicles. So they diverted me up north of the DMZ into North Vietnam, and I went in on my first run, hit the target, and as I was coming off the target, I was losing all my hydraulic pressure, which we use to control the aircraft, and all the pneumatic pressure. The air bottles were all gone, just empty. So I got my RO, the guy in the back seat, Gib, and got out safely. And then I tried to fly the airplane with throttles, since we had 2 engines, and it wasn't working. So I was finally going straight down at the ground at well over 550 nautical miles an hour, over 600 miles an hour, and I ejected. I said it's now or never, so I had to grab the handle on the floor and pull it instead of the face curtain that we pulled down over our face. And as a result, I crushed 4 vertebrae in my back and shredded my parachute. It was just torn to. I was doing probably 650, maybe 700 miles an hour, and the parachute, just shattered with the little pieces of cloth flapping in the breeze. So I hit the ground hard on 1 foot and shattered my right ankle. And there were 12 Vietnamese soldiers there, all pointing guns at me. So I didn't try to do anything crazy. Although when I went out of the airplane, I felt numb from the chest on down. And I was pounding on with my fist on my right leg, saying, I'm not coming out of here a cripple. And the next thing I know, I'm on the ground, and I heard my ankle go. And yet I told myself for 5.5 years that worst sprained ankle I ever had, must have chipped a bone. And damn, my back hurt, must have pinched a nerve. And I came home and they said, well, the Vietnamese doctor said to me when I was leaving, turning me over to the American, he looks at me and looks at paperwork and looks at me and says, oh, we thought you would die. And I said, sorry. But I went from 6'3" and 196 pounds the day I was shot down. I'd been weighed and fingerprinted for background investigation. Anyway, it came home at 6'1", lost 2 inches in height, and 130 pounds. Lost about 60-some pounds from what I came down, but I was probably down around 100 pounds at my lowest point.
What was it like being in combat?
To be in combat?
Yeah.
To me, it could be exciting or it was boring. It just, like I say, I've never been afraid of anybody or anything in my life, just the way I grew up. And things like that never bothered me. But if I was doing a good job, I was proud of it, happy. And a lot of times people couldn't understand what was going on, and I'd explain it to them. To me, it's just do the job. Do the job to the best of your ability, and better if you can, And that was my attitude all the time. I just never got concerned about not being able to do anything. I just did it.
What was your most memorable experience?
They were beating me one day because I had talked to the lieutenant colonel, and I refused to admit I spoke to him. And so they had me in a room with leg irons and handcuffs on for 3 days. And the second day, they were so mad at me because they found I'd been talking to this lieutenant colonel, but I was refusing to admit it. The third day, they came in with a 35-page handwritten report by this other officer, this Air Force officer, stating, and then Miller said, and then I said, and then I thought, oh my God. So later that day, they just said, the hell with this guy. But he was beating me with a leg iron rod, and he was frothing at the mouth. And I thought, oh shit, Miller, you've had it. And I said, oh well, you had a good marriage. You got 5 great sons. I said, you've outlived Jesus. I was 38 by that time. He died at 31. I said, I guess if this is it, this is it. But that beating, that was probably the most memory of my life.
Did you ever go back to any of the countries that you went to when you were in war?
No, I tried to go back to Vietnam a couple years after we were home. Some labor union was going over there, delegates and people. And I called them, I got a hold of them, and I said, hey, I'll be happy to go back with you and show you the sights. And he said, Ed, it's too late. We've already gotten our visas and all that stuff all together and permission from Vietnamese. So I didn't make it.
No.
I would still like to go back someday. There was only one guard I'd like to get my hands on. We called him Super Asshole.
Did you ever have any like second thoughts on going into the war?
I looked at it this way. When I decided to make a career in the military, and I became an officer and started getting promoted as fast as they could promote me, because I always got the job done for them. They couldn't imagine, I did so many crazy things that solved their problem for them. But as a result, I was just booming. The Marine Corps loved me, and they were trying to get me made general as fast as they could. In fact, when I went to Vietnam, so to me, I didn't see them as patriotic wars. I saw them as just my duty, doing my job. The way I started life, I was never afraid of anything. I'm not afraid of anything today. Nothing scares me, and nothing makes me afraid. I just go do my job. And while everybody else is hiding, and over there when they were bombing us in North Vietnam, they were all hiding under beds, and I'm looking out cracks in the wall, watching the air show. I said, hey, beautiful. But it was just my attitude about life. I didn't worry about things like they did. And that was me.
Did being in the war change you emotionally or your viewpoint on life?
No. See, I grew up in an orphanage. Mother was a single young lady and threw me in the Davenport, Iowa orphanage at birth. So I spent 5 years and a couple of months in a farm orphanage. I was 5 years old. I was taking care of the chickens, cleaning up after them and picking up their eggs and things like that. So I learned to take care of myself from day one. And I try to tell people when I talk about what I felt happened in Vietnam as far as personal living conditions in prison and all that stuff. I said, I think different than most people because I already grew up with just one set of clothes and sleeping on a cot with one blanket, no pillow. And I hated Mondays because it was wash day. And I had to sit there while my one set of clothes was being washed and dried, hanging on a clothesline for hours until it was dry enough so they gave it back to me so I could get dressed and go outside and play, do something. And anyway, I just learned things that most people don't learn, I guess, or put up with things. And since I had nothing to compare it with, to me that was life. Everybody says, oh, you poor boy. I said, nonsense. It was what I thought, this is life, this is it. Nobody told me anything different.